Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Better Than a Pill. Today, I'm so excited to have Suzanne Robotti on as a guest. And Suzanne started MedShadow Foundation in 2013 because she was harmed by a medicine called DES, which we're going to talk about today. And that was given to her mother while pregnant. And as a result, she was unable to have children. So, generations later, this hormone disruptor has been found to cause rare cancers, autoimmune diseases, and infertility. In 2017, Suzanne was appointed to the FDA Advisory Committee on Drug Safety and Risk Management, joining a panel of doctors and pharmacists as the sole consumer representative. Together, the committee reviews research and decides if a drug is safe enough for use. So, welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you, Carrie. I'm so excited to be here.
Excellent. I'm so glad you're here too. And I thought we would start off a little bit about understanding a little bit more about your story and this DES, this drug. This is really disturbing and really interesting.
Sure. It is disturbing, and we meaning people and the scientific community, learned a lot from this drug, but we haven't learned enough yet. We haven't learned our lessons from this drug, which is the distressing part. So, back when my mother was pregnant with me, in between the 1940s through to 1971, I was actually born in 57, if you want to do the math. My mother had had a couple of miscarriages, and there was a drug called diethylstilbestrol. So it's called DES, diethylstilbestrol. And it was given to women who had had a miscarriage or were at risk of miscarriage in the expectation that it would keep them from miscarrying. The theory behind the medicine is that it was a synthetic estrogen. Doctors had noticed that women's estrogen tended to drop right before they had a miscarriage. So they thought if we can just pump them full of estrogen, that will save the pregnancy. Well, life isn't that simple. The body is not that simple. And synthetic estrogen is hundreds of times more powerful than is natural estrogen that your body produces. And the body could not handle this kind of estrogen. So several things happened to those infants. They gave massive quantities of this drug to pregnant women, and it was probably between 5 and 10 million pregnant women were given this drug. I don't know why the FDA and the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, the major government organization, could never get the drug companies, or about 30 drug companies making variations of DES, couldn't ever get them to say, how much did you make? How much is in storage? Let's do the math and find out how many people were affected.
Mm.
They never figured that out. One of many questions. During that era, it was believed that there was a placental barrier that protected the fetus from anything that the mother did. The mothers were encouraged to continue smoking because it would keep them calm. Have a drink, it will keep you happy, that kind of thing. And the placental barrier would protect you from everything. We now know that that is not true. And DES is one of the major reasons we know that. DES went through the placenta into the fetus itself and pumped that fetus full of estrogen. So when I was born, the damages that had been done to me were apparent if you knew where to look. You just didn't know where to look. My fertility organs were underdeveloped. They were smaller than regular infant size and never developed past that, which is why I can never have children, never bear
Wow.
children. Right. And back then, I found out, in the large scheme of things, I was lucky because I found out when I was 13 years old, because I didn't have to go through years of fertility treatment trying to get pregnant, not understanding why. So, there's always some way to say, well, that wasn't so bad, but it was pretty bad. When you find out at 13 that you're different from every other girl on the planet, you feel very isolated and alone. And in fact, I wasn't. And I was fortunate as a young adult to find an organization called DES Action, which was educating, informing, finding people who had been exposed to DES, gathering the information, and working with the National Cancer Institute in creating research on how this affected women because they found out that in a small proportion of the fetuses who were exposed to DES, it caused a rare and often deadly, usually deadly cancer of cervix and vagina called CCA, clear cell adenocarcinoma. There are initials for everything. There will be no quiz. And because of a cluster of young women who had this very rare cancer that had only been seen in women over the age of 90, because there were 7 of them between the ages of 18 and 24, all having it at the same time, they were able to say what was in common with them. And they went all the way back to their mothers were all given DES in pregnancy, were all prescribed it, all shot full of it, or took many pills of it. So that's when they realized that that was it. That was when they realized that drugs can cross the placental barrier. And those women, of course, were very deeply harmed then. But it's another thing doctors learned at that time. Nobody realized that side effects, adverse events could appear 20 years later after exposure to the drug.
Mm. Yeah.
But as we now know, many cancers feed on estrogen. So by pumping those fetuses full of estrogen and their mothers, they created a ripe atmosphere for cancer. It's still emotional for me to talk about this, and I'm a grown up. This has been a long time,
Yeah.
but it's you take this very personally when it happens to you.
Sure.
And I did not have the CCA. Fortunately for me, I know women who have had it and survived it. I didn't know people back then, but DES Action was very, very helpful in bringing people together. They helped to change laws. They made it possible for research to happen and for lawsuits to happen. And while nothing can make up for the harm that it did, so it did. I should be more specific. My harms were somewhat unusual for more commonly among the female babies born. The reproductive organs were the uterus tended to be T-shaped if it was damaged, which is incompatible with carrying a baby. It might be tilted, which makes it more difficult, but not impossible to carry a baby. So there was a lot of infertility at first unexplained, and then they learned the patterns as they went on. There's a lot of endometriosis and fibroids. There are a lot of other issues that being exposed to too much cancer can do. And DES Action still exists. You can go to the website, find out all this information. I will say it also affected the mothers, having been pumped full of estrogen. They ended up with a high level, very high level of breast cancer in that cohort.
Mm.
The DES daughters had a high level of early onset breast cancer. They got breast cancer in their 30s and 40s. And the sons, DES sons, had non-cancerous tumors and other abnormalities in their fertility organs. And now that we're into the third generation and fourth, because it's an endocrine disruptor, it goes on through generations. And we're seeing delayed menstruation and unexplained infertility in the daughters of the granddaughters of the mothers given this drug. So, where does that leave me? As I said, fortunately, I was able to know this, so I didn't have to go through the whole get married and try to get pregnant. I did get married to a wonderful man, and we thought about having children. At that point, we didn't have all the it was the mid '80s when we got married, and they didn't have all the technology they had. I had one doctor say to me, "We could do a uterine transplant in you. You'd be the first." And I said, "No, no,
Mhm.
not really. I've been experimented on once by doctors. I don't need it
Yeah.
twice."
Yeah.
So it left many of us, all of my DES sisters that I know and brothers, it left us very scared of medicines and hesitant to put our trust in a doctor saying this is a wonder drug. That's what the ES was advertised as to doctors, as a wonder drug, a miracle worker, and it was not, and it was never pulled off the market specifically, but it was no longer indicated for use in pregnancy in 1971.
Mm. Yeah.
And, while I'd love to say it's a terrible drug, there aren't terrible drugs. Drugs are just drugs. They're not good, they're not bad, but they can
Mhm.
be used poorly, and this was used very poorly.
Sure. Wow. So, oh my goodness. Well, that's a lot, and definitely, I know you've been through a lot, and you have the courage to share, and but this has changed your life, and it's driving you to do things about it. And so, I'm guessing this has something to do with med shadow, or
Yes. Well,
maybe.
if you indulge me with a second personal story, I'll tell you how it led to med shadow. So I was, as I said, always skeptical of medicines, and my husband and I decided not to go ahead and adopt, but just be a family with the two of us, and we were fine. We were doing well. But then my nephew, family of origin, was having a lot of trouble, just kind of a lot of difficulty, and he seemed to be at the center of a lot of it. Not the center of it, but he's 12. He was 11, going on 12, and just at that point needed another place to live. He has siblings, he's two live parents, but he just needed another place to live. So my husband and I had spent a lot of time with this nice kid. I'll try not to say his name because he deserves a little privacy too. But we asked if he wanted to come live with us for, a year or maybe longer, let's see how this works out. And indeed, he came and lived with us, and he never kind of left. It's been wonderful. It was great to have a parenting experience, even though it started a week past his 12th birthday, which is a difficult time to bring a child into a household that's never had children. And we live in the middle of New York City. So there are lots of things you need to learn along the way by the time your child gets to be 12, which we did not learn. So we put him in a Catholic school, and within a month, the principal called us and said, "This kid is ADHD. You need to put him on Ritalin. We need to calm this kid down." And I said to him, I said, "Well, I'm sure you're right. What do I know? But I would like to point out that he's new. He's new to New York City. He's new to us. Can we give him a little time to calm down on his own and just see if we can figure out how to be good parents to him? Because we're terrible parents. We don't know anything about it. We're making as many mistakes as you can possibly make." And he said, "Okay, well, can give you a little time." And a month later, he called back and he said, "Time is up. He's disrupting the classes. The other kids can't learn." So I took him to a specialist because in New York, it's all specialists. And he spent 20 minutes with Dan, oh, the kid, sorry, my kid, and said, "Oh, he's totally ADHD." After 20 minutes, he said, "This kid is totally ADHD. Here's a prescription for Ritalin. And is it 5 milligrams? And if that doesn't work, we can double it to 10. And if that doesn't work, we have Wellbutrin and Adderall. Don't worry, we'll get this kid under control." And I didn't like anything about that sentence.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I said, when you live in New York and probably in many other places too, there's so much Ritalin going around here and so much ADHD being thrown about that I know the side effects of Ritalin, as do a lot of parents do. It's the anxiety, the jitteriness, the lack of appetite, stopping of growth or slowing down of growth. There's a lot of that, and then those are the bad parts. There are good parts. The concentration is much better. Their behavior is better. They listen better. They're easier to live with, honestly. But Dan never got that medicine. I asked if he could recommend an ADHD coach or someone that could help us work with his ADHD, and he said, "Oh, that never works. That's what the doctor said." And I said to the doctor, "What are the long-term side effects of giving this drug to a kid?" And he said, "There are none." And I said, "It's a drug that's designed to work in the brain. This brain is entering puberty and is not fully developed. What do you mean there are no long-term effects of it?" And he said, "There are none. I've been giving it out at that point." He'd been giving it out for 15 years. And I would just know, he said, there are no studies. And I called my internist. I called my friend, the pharmacist. I walked into my friend Lee, pharmacist in the neighborhood. And I asked them all, and I started to do my own research. And indeed, at the time, there were no studies longer than 312 days or something, which is not, of course, for a DES daughter, long enough.
Mm.
So this kid did not get the medicine, and we worked with him. We got a home helper. We ended up getting him some therapy. Very importantly, and this is another good lesson to learn. First of all, we asked for time, and we got a little bit of time, but that didn't work. And then we asked questions. And then I did my own research, knowing nothing. But I don't think I took a science course after bio in high school. But if you're listening to this program, you can do exactly what I did. You go into Google, there's Google Scholar, there's PubMed, there are Cochrane reports, and that will pop up as you search for medical studies. And you just keep clicking on, what's the definition of this word? And you will see that there are some issues with this drug. I hope that there are no long-term effects from it, but that's yet to be seen. There are some long-term studies that are going on, but long-term studies take long-term. And this was, I think it was, let me think, 20 years ago that I had this conversation with that doctor. And we are only now beginning to see some long term studies which are raising questions. One study alone does not make a fact, but multiple studies showing the same thing will make a fact. So you too can learn this. So as this kid grew up and it hit high school and was looking at college, and I thought, what should I be doing? We were obviously, fortunately, in a position where my income didn't we didn't need my income to live on. I could go back to school, I could do whatever I wanted. And I decided that I wanted to do what I could do. Oh, sorry, I can't believe I'm getting emotional. I have told this story many times, and I'm every once in a while it just hits me again.
Okay, you're fine.
I
You're
was
fine.
afraid that Ritalin was another DES, and I was afraid. I was afraid that other people would be harmed like I was
Yeah,
in different ways.
sure.
I thought about how I could stop that or make a change, and I realized Ritalin is not the bad guy here. Drugs are not bad. They can be used badly, but there are a lot of drugs out there. There are women being given a synthetic progesterone, not estrogen, progesterone, in pregnancy to avoid preterm birth. Is very scary to
Mm,
anybody who knows about DES. It's just a replication of exactly what happened with DES. So that is what MedShadow is all about. It is from the easiest thing from cold medicine to the most complicated thing like pregnancy drugs, which are terribly complicated because nobody researches them. We give you for free information on what the side effects are, what the risks are for these drugs. You can find out the benefits from anyone. That's the
mm,
easy part. And we mention benefits. We don't go deeply into them. But we talk about, what a black box warning is on a drug and, what effects this drug may have when it interacts with that drug. And we put a lot of focus on you know, everyone's going to need drugs at some point. I still have used drugs. I dislocated
yeah.
some discs in my back, and I used corticosteroids, which helped a bit. What can you do to minimize the use of your drugs? What you want to do is use them in the lowest possible dose for the shortest period of time, and know how you're going to get off of them. Because you'd be shocked at how many drugs that you take innocently for a short bout of insomnia that you find out you can't just stop taking an insomnia drug. There's something called a rebound effect that will make your insomnia worse than it
Mm,
was after you get off of it. Then you just have to go through it all again. So, yeah. So that's what Med Shadow is all about. We don't accept money from pharmaceutical companies. I think that would be in violation of our promise to you that we give independent information uninfluenced by pharmaceutical companies. And I have worked, my previous career was in magazine publishing. I sold advertisements for magazines, and I'm very aware of the influence that an advertiser or a donor to a nonprofit has to what that magazine publishes, what that website publishes, and how it affects their policies. So we do
Sure.
that.
Sure. Well, that's great. And I mean, I can see the driving force behind Med Shadow is pure, it's real, it's coming from your heart. I mean, everything that you felt and dealt with. And that's something to be said for. And it sounds like so the types of drugs, are you limited to any? Are you doing all different types or everything? Or
We try to cover all common drugs.
awesome.
Cold and flu remedies. I mean, we see things, it's right out there in the news that people read and gloss by, and I don't blame them for that. The whole cold and flu remedy, the Sudafed and Sudafed PE issue that came out a couple of months ago. Sudafed is decongestant and a pretty effective decongestant with a lot of side effects. So be careful when you use it. It can make you a little mildly delirious. It has a lot of side effects. Read on that. But what it can also do is it's pseudoephedrine, and it can be made into meth, the street drug.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
there have been TV shows about this. So the FDA, who's in charge of all drug safety, determined 10 years ago, 12 years ago, that pseudoephedrine could be still taken safely by people. It didn't need to be a prescription drug, but they wanted to slow down how much you could buy at once. You couldn't start a meth lab with it.
Mhm.
So what they did was they had the company that makes Sudafed, take it off of the regular pharmaceutical shelves and put it behind the pharmacy counter. So all you had to do is ask for it. You had to stand in line and ask for it from the pharmacist who would give it to you. You didn't have to qualify or have a prescription, but it was another step, and the pharmacist could limit you to 2 or maybe 4 packages of it. The manufacturer of Sudafed realized immediately that that was going to be a problem because people they don't want to do that. So they put Sudafed behind the counter as requested, but they came out with another drug called Sudafed PE, and it's not pseudoephedrine, it's phenylephrine. I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure I got that right, but it's another PE is how you refer to it.
Mhm.
Phenylephrine, I think. And again, it was a drug that was approved by the FDA, and they put it in, and so that would be the decongestant that you could get anytime you pick, even a combination drug, Advil, cold and flu, Motrin, cold and flu, any combination drug that claims to help you with decongestant as one or many of the things that it will help you with, it would have this PE drug in it. The PE drug has been known for years through research reports to be ineffective. But finally, the FDA held a hearing, an advisory committee hearing, not one that I was on, but a different one for cold and flu drugs. And they voted that yes, this PE is absolutely useless. It does nothing for decongestion. And the FDA took that information and published a statement saying, don't panic, it won't hurt you, it just doesn't do anything. So we, the FDA, haven't decided if we're going to take it off the market yet or not. Well, I'm insane about this. I have written about this, I've called people because there is no drug that doesn't have a side effect. It hopefully has a positive effect, that's why you're taking it, but every drug has side effects. If you take aspirin for your any kind of aspirin or a headache reliever, it's probably going to upset your stomach. That's what
Mhm.
they do.
Right.
Because once you swallow something, it goes through your entire system and it picks a couple of things to focus on. So I don't know I do know some of the side effects of PE, and they're not terrible, but I don't know the long-term side effects. It hasn't been that closely studied. It's an old drug, so the FDA's never really studied it. It just got brought in along with a lot of old drugs when the FDA started without a close scrutiny. And I don't anytime anytime a doctor would give you a drug that doesn't have a benefit to it and you are only getting risk, that's malpractice. Absolutely. You cannot you cannot be given a drug that has no anticipated benefit and yet can harm you. That
Yeah.
is wrong. It's just wrong. So,
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure that definitely you're passionate about that, and thank you for sharing that
mm.
information, and I'm sure there are a lot of drugs that you're encountering, and there's so much out there. I mean, we're gonna have to have you back on. That's all there is to it, right?
I
And
would love to come. Yeah, thanks.
we'll
I
have
would
to
love to
break
come. We were going to talk about something else, but we never got there.
No, it's fine. We can break down, categories, but now since we're talking about before we finish up, just the topic of cough medicine, curious, do you have one that you do recommend?
You know,
What's the safest one when we have to reach for one and we're desperate, right? Because we know they have side effects, right?
you're not going to like the answer. The
Okay.
safest one is tea with honey.
Yeah, that's what we do. Yeah. No, no,
Yeah,
I like the answer. I
and
do.
chicken soup, and if you've ever done nasal lavage, where you put the squirt water, saline solution up one side of your nostril and come out the other, it's disgusting, but it's effective.
Yeah.
And now that we can all work from home at least a little bit, just don't go out and stay in bed and watch the Kardashians or whatever one does when you feel sick and let your body, because your body has an amazing ability to heal itself, just an amazing capacity for health.
Right.
It wants to be healthy. You just
Yeah.
have to help it.
Yeah. No, I agree. So your answer is there is no good cough medicine out there. And that,
Here's one more tidbit. You're gonna love this.
Mhm.
There was a study done by this doctor in, I think, Maine. He's just a local family doctor, and this was 7 or 8 years ago. I wrote about it in the chat, but nobody else picked up this study. Nobody else. So he noticed that people are coming in, in the cold and flu season and coughing, 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 and they'd say, Doc, I haven't had my cold in 2 weeks, but I'm still coughing like crazy. I got over my flu 2 weeks, I'm still coughing. And he'd say, what are you taking for it? They'd say nothing, even as they're putting a cough drop in their mouth.
Mhm.
And he said, why don't you stop with the cough drops and tell me how it goes? And he said he called because I talked to him. And I said, I'm eating a cough drop as we talk. And he said, okay, so call me in 2 days. I called him 2 days later. He said, how was the day after? And I said, it was awful. I coughed my head off. Rebound.
Mm.
And he said, how is it now? I said, I haven't coughed all day. He said, cough drops will make you cough. Mentholated
There you
are
go.
worse, but all of them will make you cough.
Yeah. Great takeaway. So no good cough medicine and stay away from cough drops.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Even when kids are young, a mainstream medical practitioner, pediatrician will say, don't give your kids cough medicine, right? And so why wouldn't that apply for an adult? It's just like the body can heal naturally, right? And so, yeah, I mean, we now I'm working with a naturopath. I give my kids something called silver, which
Mhm.
is a natural immunity supplementation. And then honey, yes, we use Manuka honey a lot because that's a natural honey that has healing properties. And they don't like the tea, but they'll do the Manuka honey in fluids
Mm,
and then some other natural, if we can, we try to do the natural remedies because there have been times where I have had to take a cough medicine or broken down and taken the,
mhm.
whatever you want to call it, Theraflu or something like that. I don't even know the
Yep.
exact drug, but I'm aware that taking
Yeah.
this is probably isn't the best, but sometimes we do those things, or I know I have, so it's kind of like balancing out, you know.
I'm always embarrassed when somebody says something like, "Oh, did you get your flu shot this year?" And like, "Oh, no." And I normally do, but somehow I never got around to it this year. And
Yeah.
the flu shot is not 100%, but it keeps you from getting really sick and it helps you to keep from spreading it to other people. And yeah, I'm hardly perfect, but
Yeah.
do be careful with just because something is holistic or homegrown or whatever. Agatha Christie, the old mystery writer, killed a lot of people with the flower digitalis. So they're powerful and they work because they're powerful. So get it from a very reputable organization
Mhm.
and make sure that they, if you can, they have that label from, say, a USP, an outside laboratory that verifies what's in it.
Mhm. I know even one of my clients I work with is a retired physician, and she's done her work with functional medicine and,
Yeah.
supplementation, but she's always saying that same thing. Please, be mindful too, because just like what you're doing, these drugs that are being created can work against us. So can some natural prostitutes. So it's like information, definitely what you shared, reputable source and all those things, and making sure there's no interactions with anything else that you're taking on if you do natural things. But I think that working with somebody you trust is really
Yes.
key. And I think that's where it's at, right? Working with
A
somebody you
lot of people
trust.
just go to the health food store and just,
Yeah.
buy supplements and think
Yeah.
that that's good enough, and it's not. You need to work with somebody who has been trained and knows what they're doing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, yay. Well, this has been awesome. You're a wealth of information. I'm so excited that you're doing this med shadow and just, I'm going to be including that link in the episode today so people know
Mhm.
how to get a hold of this information and start educating themselves. And you're on there a lot. You're obviously writing a lot and putting information out there. And there's just so much out there. And, look, that's why this is Better Than a Pill podcast for a reason. I mean, it's just like what education, that's powerful right there. So getting that out there. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story a little bit too, and
Thank
what
you.
led you to do this work. It's
Yeah.
been great.
Thanks. I love your podcast. I love the name of your podcast. I love your philosophy. So, yes, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. And you'll be back. We're going to have you on again. But
I look forward to it. Thanks.
remember, guys, we do new episodes every other week on Wednesday, and I look forward to having you join me then.